Meantime, Quebec Liberal MP Stephen Guilbeault resigned from cabinet yesterday, citing his strong opposition to the new energy agreement with Alberta. Guilbeault's decision was sudden, but not entirely a shock to those familiar with the former Environment Minister's dedication to fight climate change.
Well, I guess since he was with Greenpeace before, I guess that was the move he had to do. I guess maybe his values don't align with the party anymore. So yeah, I figure that's the right move he just did.
Everybody building the pipelines. Why we cannot?
I think it's a pretty good thing. Like Mike Carney doesn't have a lot of formation on environment and doesn't give a lot for environment, and it's the old. I think it's the old old Minister of Environment, Stephen Guilbeault.
He's a strong character. I know that he's going to rebound. He's probably going to feel a little bit lighter in his step as he goes through the rest of his time in Parliament, and I'm sure he's going to go on to bigger and better things in his career.
Before being elected in 2019, Guilbeault was a founding member of Equiterre, a Quebec group dedicated to a more equitable and environmentally responsible world. Guilbeault says he will stay on as MP, but resign from his cabinet roles and as Carney's lieutenant in Quebec. Well, joining me now is Tim Gray, the Executive Director of Environmental Defence Canada. Tim, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Let's get into this, shall we, too? You are among a number of groups that are opposing this pipeline, too, and the proposal itself. Take me through what your biggest objections are.
Well, I think all aspects of it are very concerning. Obviously, increasing oil production from the oil sands in Alberta would have huge economic and environmental costs. There's about $280 billion worth of stranded toxic material there that has yet to be dealt with. That would obviously increase our overall emissions. Climate-causing emissions would increase. Massive risk to ocean life and to communities on the West Coast, where the pipeline would end because of the risk of a tanker spill there. Repudiation of many of our existing climate policies, which were set to reduce emissions from Canada. So a real reversal of the approach that Canadians want in terms of addressing climate change, and a huge lift to the oil and gas industry, which of course is largely responsible for the trajectory that the world is headed on towards a climate catastrophe.
I just want to dig in, if we can, to a little bit to, this about face for the Prime Minister on Canada's previous climate commitments to, we saw Stephen Guilbeault, the former Environment Minister, resign as a result of this. We just touched on that too. What does that mean, in your view, for what a new pipeline could bring, at least at this point, and that shift in these priorities?
Well, I think the former minister's resignation speaks loudly to the risk that it brings about reversing our progress. It also means not doing things we should be doing. The world is moving rapidly forward in a clean energy transition, in particular places like Europe and China. Canada doubling down on the industry from the last century makes very little sense economically, has a huge risk of having stranded assets here in Canada, when we can no longer sell oil and gas to the rest of the world. Most of what we produce, of course, is exported. And as those markets change and we're still producing those things and not investing in the future, we're at huge risk. Unnecessarily so, because Canada has huge assets in the renewable space. We could be doing solar, wind, tidal, water, batteries, both for domestic use and export. We could be building high-speed transit between Edmonton and Calgary and the corridor in Southern Ontario. We could be doing more in the EV space. We could be building all the homes we need across Canada. So there's a lot of things we could be doing with the money that is going to be sunk into trying to expand an industry that must contract if we're all going to survive, and into an industry that most of the world is increasingly recognizing that we have to wind down over time, not expand.
Now, the MOU does, clearly state that the federal government will not look at lifting or amending the tanker ban on BC's West Coast until a lot of commitments are met. But that seems to be, one of the very big sticking points for Indigenous groups, for environment groups like yours. Is it possible that it could happen, that we're going to get to that point, from your perspective right now? Or do you believe that this is, this project isn't going to get there?
I do not think the project will get there. I mean, I think it's a very bad idea, and I think it's a distraction and a waste of time. There is no private sector proponent. In addition, the Alberta government, the oil industry has vociferously fought carbon pricing, which is at the core of what the Prime Minister is saying needs to be improved in order for this to go ahead. They fought the retail carbon price. They will now pivot to fighting the industrial carbon price and trying to demonize that with Canadians. So I very much doubt that that will be addressed, nor will a private sector proponent come forward, because the oil industry has demonstrated they're, especially in Canada, most interested in share buybacks, massive dividends to their shareholders as they recoup their investment from the oil sands in the past, and in full recognition that demand is expected to peak and wane going into the next decade. So I think it's unlikely. And I think the consequences, if it does go ahead, are so catastrophic that very, very many Canadians will resist this move.
Tim Gray, the Executive Director of Environmental Defence Canada. Thanks again for your time today, Tim. Appreciate this.